The rain poured relentlessly as Marcus Hale wandered through the shadowy alleys of a rundown flea market. A reclusive toymaker, Marcus often sought inspiration in forgotten trinkets. Among the stalls, an antique puppet caught his eye. A marionette with lifelike glass eyes, its wooden face carved in grotesque precision. "Take it," rasped the hunched vendor, barely meeting Marcus's gaze. "But don't come back asking for help." Though unnerved, Marcus couldn't resist the craftsmanship. He handed over a few bills and carried the puppet home, unaware of the ancient darkness tethered to it. Marcus lived in a converted workshop, cluttered with tools, half-finished toys, and dust-coated memories. His sister, Sophie, visited occasionally, urging him to reconnect with the world. "You can't keep hiding in this place," Sophie said during her last visit. "You need more than your toys." Marcus dismissed her concerns, throwing himself into his work. That night, he began restoring the puppet. Its joints were stiff, its paint chipped, and its clothing threadbare. He named it Elwood, after an old book he loved as a child. Over the next week, strange things began happening. Night 1. Marcus woke to faint whispers, like someone muttering in the walls. Elwood was still on the workbench, untouched. Night 2. Tools moved inexplicably, and the puppet appeared on a shelf across the room, its glass eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Night 3. Marcus dreamed of being a marionette, his limbs pulled by invisible strings. When he awoke, Elwood was on the bed beside him, its expression subtly different. A wider grin, deeper cracks in its painted face. He tried rationalizing these events. "I must be sleepwalking," he muttered, but the sense of dread grew. Sophie visited again, alarmed by Marcus's pale, exhausted demeanor. She noticed the puppet immediately. "Why do you have that creepy thing?" she asked, shivering. "It's just a project," Marcus replied, avoiding her gaze. Sophie insisted he take a break, but Marcus refused, drawn to Elwood in ways he couldn't explain. That night, Sophie left a voicemail. "Call me if you need anything. I mean it." Marcus didn't respond. Haunted by the escalating events, Marcus returned to the flea market. The vendor was gone, replaced by an elderly woman named Eleanor. "You've brought home a curse," she whispered, her hands trembling. Eleanor explained that Elwood was once owned by a ventriloquist who delved into forbidden rituals, binding a vengeful spirit to the puppet. The spirit sought to escape by consuming its owner's body. "Destroy it," Eleanor urged, sliding a worn leather book across the table. "But it won't go easily." Marcus tried to destroy Elwood, but every attempt failed. The puppet wouldn't burn, its glass eyes wouldn't shatter, and it seemed to return, unharmed, no matter what he did. Elwood grew bolder, its movements no longer subtle. Marcus would find it crawling across the floor, its limbs clicking unnaturally. It began whispering directly to him, taunting him with memories of his past failures and his estranged family. "You're nothing without me," it hissed. "I'll make you whole." One night, Marcus awoke to find his arm moving against his will, carving a crude wooden heart. The puppet sat in the corner, its grin impossibly wide. The next morning, Sophie arrived, alarmed by Marcus's frantic calls. She found the workshop in chaos, with carvings of the puppet's face scattered everywhere. "I'm not crazy," Marcus shouted, showing her the moving puppet. To her horror, Elwood turned its head toward her and blinked. Sophie, determined to save her brother, deciphered Eleanor's book. It described a ritual to sever the spirit's connection to the living world, but it required confronting the puppet in its domain, a psychological trap created to torment its victim. As Sophie prepared the ritual, Marcus fell into a trance. He found himself in a nightmarish version of his workshop, where Elwood towered over him, controlling his every move with invisible strings. Sophie performed the ritual, chanting incantations while Elwood's real body writhed and twisted. In the nightmare realm, Marcus resisted the puppet's pull, cutting the strings with the wooden heart he had carved. The workshop erupted in chaos. Elwood's glass eyes shattered, releasing a deafening scream as the spirit was banished. Months later, Marcus was rebuilding his life, with Sophie's support. but the experience left scars. He kept Elwood's remains locked in a steel box, unable to discard them. Late at night, he swore he could still hear faint whispers, as if the spirit wasn't entirely gone. Backstory of Elwood and its creator, Gregory Vance. Gregory Vance was once a celebrated ventriloquist in the late 1800s, known for his masterful performances that blurred the line between human and puppet. Audiences marveled at the lifelike expressions and eerie presence of his marionettes, especially his favorite, Elwood, a puppet with unsettlingly human features. Vance's fame, however, concealed a darker truth. Obsessed with perfection and immortality, he sought not just to control his puppets, but to infuse them with life. His fascination with the occult led him to forbidden rituals, drawn from ancient grimoires he collected during his travels. The idea came to Vance during one of his performances. A heckler mocked him, calling him a fraud and accusing him of hiding his failures behind wooden dolls. Humiliated, Vance vowed to create a puppet so lifelike it would silence any critic. But this puppet, he decided, would need more than craftsmanship. It would need a soul. Vance began studying rituals designed to bind spirits to objects. His chosen method required a willing or unwilling sacrifice. On a stormy night, he lured a drifter into his workshop, offering food and shelter. As the man slept, Vance slit his throat and captured his final breath in a glass vial. Using the blood, breath, and hair of the victim, Vance carved runes into Elwood's wooden frame, sealing the spirit inside. But the act came at a cost. The spirit, now tethered to the puppet, wasn't content to remain dormant. Initially, the ritual seemed successful. Elwood's movements became unervingly smooth, his glass eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. During performances, audiences swore they saw the puppet blink, smile, or even glance at them. But Elwood's behavior grew erratic. When left alone, the puppet would move of its own accord, knocking over tools and scratching strange symbols into the walls. Vance began hearing whispers, soft, raspy voices calling his name. As weeks passed, the spirit in Elwood grew stronger, demanding more sacrifices to maintain its vitality. Vance, driven by a mix of guilt and fear, complied, luring more victims to his workshop. The murders didn't go unnoticed. Local authorities investigated the disappearances, eventually linking them to Vance. One fateful night, a group of vigilantes stormed his workshop. When they arrived, they found Vance in a crazed state, arguing with Elwood as if it were alive. The puppet sat on his lap, its face twisted into a grin far wider than any human could replicate. The vigilantes burned the workshop, ensuring Vance and Elwood were consumed by the flames. Or so they thought. Elwood's wooden body, imbued with dark magic, couldn't be destroyed so easily. The puppet was discovered decades later, partially charred but intact, in the ruins of the workshop. It passed from owner to owner, each time leaving behind a trail of misfortune and death. Over time, Elwood became an urban legend, known as the puppet that whispers. Collectors who sought it often vanished, and those who survived described eerie experiences. Dreams of being controlled, phantom voices, and the sensation of invisible strings pulling at their limbs. The spirit trapped inside Elwood, twisted by anger, despair, and the dark rituals that bound it, had one goal: to escape. To do so, it needed a human host, someone vulnerable enough to be manipulated and consumed. Each owner brought the puppet closer to freedom, their bodies slowly deteriorating as Elwood fed on their life force. Elwood's journey eventually led it to Marcus Hale, whose loneliness and emotional wounds made him the perfect prey. Unbeknownst to Marcus, every repair he made to Elwood's body brought the puppet closer to completion, and closer to possessing him entirely.